it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome back to an episode of Her Success Story. Today, I have an amazing guest and somebody I've had the pleasure to get to know over the last several years. Deb Boulanger is the CEO of The Great Do-Over, where she coaches accomplished women leaders. So I want to clarify this. She's not for the newbies here. She sees women in their accomplishments from day one, and that's one of the things I truly that endear to my heart. She helps them find their courage, their confidence to make the bold moves in their lives and their careers. She's the founder of the Launch Lab for Women Entrepreneurs, a 12-week virtual accelerator. And this focus is the focus for new coaches, consultants, trainers, and other service professionals. Deborah has been launching new services in the professional service sector for more than 27 years. Go ahead, humor me, pull up that picture and say, it's not possible. Deborah, thank you for joining me. Deb, thanks for being here as a girlfriend today.
Oh, thank you, Ivy. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
So we had the opportunity to just have conversations, girl time, and talk about life as women who've just done some stuff. And I'm going to keep it clean. Not always my nature, but I'm going to keep it clean for the show. So we've done some stuff. And in the stuff that you've accomplished, you've looked at this thing with women in particular, the lack of self-esteem, the lack of self-confidence, the questioning of ourselves, the unsureness of taking those bold moves. You know, you're often my first question on interviews is, when you were a little girl, did you imagine yourself doing this stuff? Where did, in 27 years plus in business, where did this come about? And where and how did this come about today?
Yeah, it certainly didn't come from my childhood. I like to tell this story. Well, I revealed the story recently of being 5 years old and on a TV show called Romper Room with Miss Bonnie in Providence, Rhode Island. So shout out.
I loved Romper Room. Yes, a huge shout out to Romper Room and our generation.
And our generation, right? So on Romper Room, I don't know how I got selected. I was in kindergarten and Miss Bonnie has us flying around the room as airplanes. And we have our arms out and the boys are behind me, vroom, 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 all around the room. And I trip over my feet and fall flat on my face. And from that point forward, I decided it wasn't safe to be seen or put myself out in public. So no, I wasn't born this way. This is a series of actually taking bold moves and stepping outside of my comfort zone over the course of decades.
So feel you there. So where did this work then start evolving? So you're in the corporate world for many, many years. Share a little bit about that piece of your journey.
Sure. So I actually have a degree in education, and I decided that technology was making big moves and I better hop on that train and be in the latest and greatest. And I just naturally, and I think sometimes, Ivy, that insecurity has a way of working in our favor. So even though I was extremely insecure, I decided to keep pushing myself and asking for more. So I started in sales, and then I decided to walk into the CEO's office and say, sales isn't working because we don't have a consistent message. We need a marketing department, and I want to start that. And it was a small enough company that he said, okay, I think you should. And then make bold moves into taking on product development. And then I wanted to manage my own piece of the business. And I started something and grew it to 32 million. And then it came crashing down and I felt like a total imposter. Like, how did I get here? Do they know who's running this business? I'm not qualified to do this.
So is that where, we take bold moves? And I feel you, and I've done this in my own career. I, especially young, up and coming, I don't know where my guts came from, but I just said, okay, sure, why not? And then all of a sudden I would look over my shoulder and said, who in the world is doing this? And why in the world would they trust me?
Right. Boom. right? Boom. And it's interesting. Bain did a study of women executives, and in their study, they showed that women's confidence actually decreases by a full 13% the more accomplished you are. So this says the more bold moves we take, the higher up we get in the corporate ladder, that the less confident we actually feel inside. And I thought that was fascinating and really true.
And you would think the opposite. You would think as we take on more responsibility, as we grow in our careers, as we're succeeding, for lack of a better word, that our confidence should build versus our confidence starts questioning bigger.
Right. And I think here we really need to tease out confidence versus self-esteem and self-worth, right? So
So
am I
can you
worth
talk
this?
about, explain the difference, because so often confidence, self-esteem, they get lumped together, and self-worth.
Right, right. So confidence comes from doing things that feel uncomfortable and you're not quite sure of, but once you do them and you succeed, it works and you get confidence, right? So confidence is about taking action. It's about doing stuff. Self-esteem is about, am I good enough? And I think that's the pandemic with women, at least in this culture, in this country. Am I good enough? We're all familiar with that HP study that said in order for women to apply for a job, they need to check off 100% of the criteria for that position, where men will apply if they meet 50 or 60% of the criteria. So that I'm not good enough is something that's just underlying our subconscious. And that's where we need to uncover it. That's the source that we need to go to and start rewriting that story.
So when we look at the concept of rewriting stories, what is this? What does this look like? And is this only for women, or do some men play in here as well?
I think men play in here as well. I think if you ask them, I think they're fitting into their male norms and they're making boisterous moves or bold moves when inside they too are questioning themselves, but they, I think, have been conditioned by society that you're a guy, you're supposed to just do this stuff and have all this stuff wrapped up. So I think inside, if you ask them, I work with more women than men, so I don't have these conversations very frequently, but I don't know, Ivy, do you? Do you discover that men have the same issue?
I think I work also with more women, and I do work with men, and I think men have it shows up differently, and it still shows up. Men are more boisterous, and they, I'll divide it this way. I think men lead with their head, their conscience in that way, a little bit of their ego, everything that is showing up in their head based. And because of that, that's not good or bad. It just is, and I'll put this as the science of Ivy. This is not Stanford or Harvard here, ladies and gentlemen. They show up with their head, and in their head is their ego and their conscious and their belief, where women show up in our torso. Okay.
Interesting.
And in our torso sits the heart and our gut. And in our heart of hearts, our heart blooms big, and we're like, oh, we want to give, we want to serve, because it's leading with the heart. And then we go and question our head, but can we do this? Can we do this? So I think men lead with their head, follow with their torso. I think women lead with their torso, follow with their head.
Oh, that's so interesting too. And once you end up in the corporate world, it's all analytical and very much male driven. So it's about getting stuff done, reaching goals. It's not about following your intuition. It's about making good analytical decisions based on data, and a lot of big data right now. So getting back to your original question about how do you rewrite this story, right? This I'm not good enough story, is realizing that first, it doesn't even belong to you. that it is just a story. And when we were born, just think about, if you're a mother, what it was like having a child and your child being born and being all curious and the world is perfect and it's up for grabs, and oh, let me see what this is like and let me grab this, and we're full of energy and there is no fear. There is no fear. Fear is learned. So this whole I'm not being good enough, I'm not good enough, or I'm in danger, or feeling like it's not safe here, is all learned thought and learned behavior. And we learn it from our parents and from the adults who are influencing us in those very early years. And it doesn't belong to them either. It's their ancestral history that's been carried down, and all the messages of, for me, it was, oh, you want to keep it clean, but Deb, don't do a half a job, right?
Yeah.
Make sure that you've got your I's dotted and crossed T's. So that made me a perfectionist. Right? And what does a perfectionist do? A perfectionist procrastinates because, oh my goodness, it might not be good enough. So understanding your patterns and understanding how this behavior of this story shows up in your life. Are you not taking risks? Do you not ask for a raise? Do you not ask for the promotion? Do you not, I work with women who have a do more idea. They want to jump from corporate and do more with their lives later on. And what's the risk of making a change? So I think that's how it holds us back. And that's why we need to rewrite the story.
I love what you're saying, and this is so true. And I do work in our work is similar and so different. And I see this show up in money stories. So, and I'll always say, our parents teach us things that they didn't realize they were teaching us. And myself as a parent, we teach our children things that we don't realize what we're teaching. And it was so interesting. This goes back to an old client. And here's a short piece of it. We were looking at the money story and how history was taught. And she said, Ivy, you have to understand, I'm the daughter of parents who lived through the Depression. And I said, oh, and she goes, you see, you understand? I said, so am I. And she goes, really? And we had two different parent stories, but her parent story is, you see, because my parents lived through this, they were unsure of spending, their confidence around, as in the Deb world, their confidence around the money. Where mine is, yes, we survived, we have to live, you have to live life to the fullest, right? Same generation, same experience, two different stories. And I think it's fascinating that you're sharing this, and it's so important because we see the stories come down with what you're talking about, perfectionism, and how if we look at being a perfectionist, right, is we have to do things right. And it's we review our homework before we turn it in, as we might teach our kids. And how does this show up in adulthood, in leadership, that could then come back to stop us?
Right. You have to get A's. You have to be the good guy. You have to please other people. You have to put other people before yourself. You have to excel. You have to be at the head of the class. You have to be the valedictorian. So the opportunity is to understand not only your money story and the messages that you received explicitly, implicitly, however you received them as a child, but your physical story about your body, your health, women and body image. A lot of that came from their mothers. And what about your relationships? What do you deserve as far as love and love relationships? And frequently these patterns play out in all different areas of your life. So the opportunity is, what is the story I received around how successful I could be or how much money I could have? What's the story around how much love and what a relationship was like? And what's the story around my body?
So in working with your clients today, what are some of the themes you see and how do you help them navigate this?
So some of the things, of course, are sweeping things under the rug, wearing blinders, just ignoring what's not working in my life in hopes that it will go away. And of course, it comes back to bite you in the butt later. It never really does go away. It's wanting more and not asking for more. It's so therefore settling for less than you want, less than you deserve. And it's not asking, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a woman in business, whether you're sitting on boards, being able to ask for what you want in exchange for the value that you are going to provide. And that money is, I love this quote from Kate Northrup, money is energy in exchange for value. And when we don't ask for our worth, we devalue ourselves. And we also devalue our clients or devalue the people that we're working with by not asking them to invest in their value through us. So I think that's a big trigger, not asking for the raise or asking for as much as you want, not holding out for the right relationship, and not treating your body the way. So sweeping health issues under the rug is another way of sabotaging your success.
So how do you, as far as, I'd love to say, okay, girlfriend, let's go create a movement around this, right? How do we change? Obviously change is one woman at a time, one person at a time. In saying change in the big picture, what is your vision for the work you do?
Well, the big picture for the work I do is definitely a ripple effect. I mean, I think the more our voices get heard, and I think for women, especially women, I think of our generation, of stepping into the spotlight and being seen and heard and having your story seen and heard. So that means, speaking on stages and writing books, all the opportunities to really get your message out there, because it's so critical that our young women who are in crisis now, a young woman in my circle, in my family, just called me and said, Auntie, is it okay if I leave my job because I'm so miserable here? Will it look bad on my resume if I don't immediately go into something else? And I said, I think that's a falsehood. If you're not happy where you are and you could spend more energy looking for something that you really love, where you could really thrive, I think that would be an excellent use of your time. So I think some of the stories and the fears of, will I be perceived as less than if I don't stay in a miserable spot knowing that it's not working? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be role models for our daughters, because in the age of feminism, we wanted to wear the pants, we wanted to bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, be equal to men in every way. And in many ways, we put our careers first. And we told these young women who are now up and coming and just joining the workforce that career is first. And I think now we need to help them rewrite that story.
Yeah. Very, very true. Very, very true. Tell me a little bit about your business.
So my business has evolved as I have evolved and changed. And I think that's par for the course. And it's been an interesting part of this journey. So I coach women in the great do-over and starting over, no matter what is going on in your life. If it's a career that's no longer serving you, or you feel the pull to do more and you can't within the confines of your current company, and you want to explore what it would be to start a project on your own and maybe turn that into a business, and to finally step into the woman you really are, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and tap into that courage, really. Because I think self-esteem, once you rewrite that story, it becomes a courageous action. Confidence is about doing it and feeling good and being able to do it again. Courage is about making those bold moves and making those decisions that, I'll be all right. I don't have to worry about living in a box under a bridge, which is a fear I really hear. And understanding that fear is just a thought. And most of the times, the things that we're afraid of don't even exist. So most rewarding part of my work is helping women leaders manage that inner game.
So how did you manage your own fear as you built your own business?
By getting the tools, by really examining things, and it comes from Buddhism, it comes from Byron Katie and the work. It's examining the thought, is it true? So our beliefs from talked a lot about beliefs from childhood, which form our thoughts, the things that we think on a daily basis. And it's what we think that creates the emotional drivers that we as women lead through, as you said, and that determines our actions, and our actions are our results. And so it's this cyclical thing. And so dealing with thought, but most of us are on autopilot. We don't think about what we're thinking. There's 60 to 70,000 thoughts that go through this mind every day. 80% of them are negative. I call it your hoarder's house. That you can't feel inspired, you can't get any sense of intuition on what to do next because there's no room. So it's about clearing out the thinking that's not working for you, that isn't even true, and replacing that with inspired thoughts that's followed by inspired actions. And that allows you to make bold moves in your life and career.
So in calling a spade here, and been learning and teaching thoughts, beliefs, actions, okay, for years. It sounds so easy. It's only 3 words. How hard can it be? Come on. Do we start at the thoughts? Do we just start at the actions? The beliefs of, oh my goodness, I can't change my beliefs. So where do we begin with it? Because I think this is a really important conversation.
It is. And I think you can change your beliefs. I think at some point, or at least come to terms with them, and you say, thanks, mom and dad. You did the best you could with the available information that you had. I so appreciate everything I learned from you. And I choose to believe something different about my life and what's possible for me. And that's the sticky part. It's really hard to change your beliefs because they are with you, but you can choose to adopt a new belief. The thoughts are, it's interesting because fear, I say it's the stickiest and slipperiest of all emotions. You think you've nailed it in one area of your life, and then it shows up in a different way, in a different costume, in a different area. But the bottom line is, are we ever really in danger? And the only danger is when we start thinking what other people think of us, or we start thinking about what will happen if we do this. And we start creating these false tragic scenarios of living in a box under a bridge, or, losing my home, when the likelihood of any of those ever happening is so small. And the opportunity is to really take a risk. And I think women need to take more risks in their lives, because it's by taking risks that you actually step into this open space of like, oh, wow, I am like so much bigger than I thought I was. And that makes it scary. We always have something to be afraid of, but it's so interesting that why limit yourself? Why keep yourself in a box? You don't have to play in someone else's box. You can create the box that you want to play in. And that's the opportunity to living a full life. And that's what the Great Do-Over is all about. How do you live a full, rich, and satisfying life that's of your own design? You got me on my soapbox here, Ivy. I'm sorry.
I happen to love it. And I truly, this is such an important component of the work we both do. I'll always say to people, when in doubt, find something you can do. What's one thing you can do? Because if we stay in the beliefs, goodness, okay, today I'm going to believe differently. Oh, well, that's a lot of work. And people who know me well know I love what I do, and I'm going to do it from a place of joy. I don't want to do it from a place of it's hard. So, well, if that's hard and a lot of work, that's not going to work. So forget that. But if I show up with what is one thing I can do, and that's put me into action. And through that action, we can start seeing things differently. And I'm also, and I believe we're both on this page as well, in the section of mindset, of what do we do to quiet our mind? do you listen to, is there a meditation app that you're fond of? There's so many out there. I'm a fan of a few of them. What do you do? Do you sit quietly? Do you do yoga? A friend of mine, for goodness, probably, I met him, dear friend, I met him when my son was about 8 to 10 weeks old. My son's 24. So we go back just a short while. He's huge into mindset, and he's teaching Tai Chi these days. And, so it doesn't matter what you do, or if you're doing one thing or several things, are you taking a moment that your thoughts are quiet to create newness there?
Yeah, so we have to stop the momentum, right? And so there are a variety of practices. For me personally, it's about journaling. So I read The Artist's Way in probably 1992 when it first came out. I've been journaling, right? So I've been journaling for 30 years now. And that is a daily practice. It clears out it's my purging of the hoarder's house. I just put it all out onto the page so I don't have to carry around with me. It's also becomes a place for insight and inspiration. And then, of course, meditation. And I would love to say I am as diligent about my meditation practice as I was about 10 years ago when I used to do 10-day meditation retreats. But I do move it into my day because I realize the benefit of getting quiet. Because through getting quiet, then there are insights that emerge in that quiet time, people who I should connect with, ideas for things to write, ideas for things to speak about. And it's in that quiet time where the inspiration happens. So, and I'm not a yogi, but I think yoga is a beautiful practice. I love to walk. I'm not a runner. But I think it's important to connect with who you are first thing every morning.
I have to say, for me, quiet walking is huge inspiration for me. There's just that quiet space of movement. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. And I've done yoga on and off, and I'm in an off phase. It doesn't mean it won't be an on phase. Doesn't matter what it is, right? But it's that quiet space of movement. In the summer, it's swimming. It's that quiet place of swimming. And it's like all of a sudden, it's like, do I have pen and paper? Here's an idea. Am I going to get it wet? And I keep, my foot. And it's interesting because exactly what you're talking about, Deb, is you're a journaler. And I said, I would never write based on a childhood story, right? I would never write. I refused to start a blog. I think my blog might have started in 2011 or 13 or something around along those lines. All right. I will never write. I will never write. Yet I release content of multiple fashions weekly now. We got a couple of books under the belt.
Yeah, you wrote a book.
Will there be more? We'll see. Right?
Yes.
It's no longer a no when you're willing to show up with. Okay. If I stayed in the story, exactly what you're saying, if I stayed in that story, I would not be where I am today. So Thank you so much for sharing that. That's huge.
And let's give our listeners one last gift is if it's too hard to make the jump from where you're believing what's possible now to where you want to be, you can always give yourself the gift of being in the process of. So I am in the process of writing a book. Right now, I'm just figuring out what my idea is, or I am in the process of making my next big move, or I'm in the process of finding the perfect relationship for me. Being in the process of gives you a bridge from where you are now to where you want to be.
I love that. And I think that's a huge takeaway here, to give yourself the gift of, and there's an elasticity to that, being in the process of. It could be smaller, it can be bigger, because you're in the process. There could be 3 steps, there could be 10 steps to the process. Nobody identified that. You are in control of it. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So how can our listeners stay in touch, know more about you and the work you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So on thegreatdoover.com, great DOOVER.com, and on LinkedIn, Deb Boulanger, and would love to stay in touch or connect with anyone who resonates with what we've shared today.
So when you're thinking about, am I enough? When you're thinking about, should I? Do I have the courage? These are the greatest resources to know that there are people who have expertise, experience, and are in the journey with us every day. And thank you for the work you do, Deb.
Thank you, Ivy. It's been such a pleasure sharing this moment with you.
Listeners, remember to go down, subscribe to Her Success Story. We will appear in your inbox with new episodes every Monday morning, so you don't have to go looking for us. We will be there for you. In the same way, please feel free to leave a little note, a message, what you enjoyed, what your biggest takeaways were, as well as what else you want to hear. We're here to serve and deliver. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Deb, Deborah.
Thank you, Ivy. Deb, Deborah, they both work.
And thank you for making a difference.
To shine, don't need your approval anymore, 'cause I've got mine.